writing system, that's what makes him one of the candidates, you know, to compare him with the Book of Mormon.
What building is that?
That building just right over there.
What's it called?
City
It's
building.
the City Hall, where they kept the records, where people got married, where they paid their taxes to as well. From time to time, the people from outside, they also had access to the city, guys, okay? So the wall doesn't mean that they never got the chance to come in. Actually, that's why they had 5 entrances, because have you guys ever watched the Hunger Games? You know how in the Hunger Games, the districts were kind of organized depending on their trade? So you had a district of carpenters, a district of miners and things like that. Well, same thing back in those days, guys. Beyond the walls of Tulum, they had communities of people that were organized according to their trades. So you had the farmers and the carpenters on one side, you had the brick masons and the craftsmen and artisans on another side, and then you had the peasants and gatherers on another side. So everyone had their own specific entrance. And on one day of the year, everyone got access to the city because everyone had the chance also to come and worship at a specific temple that I'm going to show you guys later today, okay? But from time to time, people had to come inside also to pay their taxes and tributes, and all of that was collected at that building that we're seeing over there. Let me show you guys an example of what the Mayan writing system looks like. I'll show you over here, guys. This is what the Mayan writing system looks like. Every single one of these little squares with figures and symbols in them, these are what we know as phonetic hieroglyphics, guys. So basically this means that all these symbols and all these icons, we can say, that are inside each one of these squares are basically a combination of sounds. So you'd interpret them as sounds. It's the same way we do with our letters or with our alphabet system. We interpret our letters with sounds, okay? So if you pronounce all the sounds that this specific hieroglyph gives you right over here, guys, you'd have a whole sentence. So as you read or pronounce all the sentences here, you have a whole story, a whole instruction, or some sort of content, okay? But this is what the Mayan writing system looks like. Now, something very interesting about the Mayan writing system, guys, is that many years ago, a guy named David Stewart, you guys can look up his name. He's one of the famous Mayan gurus that deciphered lots of the Mayan hieroglyphics over on the west coast of Mexico. He discovered that a famous glyph, guys, a famous glyph that's typically found at the beginning of these storyboards was always the same. And let me show you what that looks like. It's actually the logo of our company. It's right over here, guys. It's the icon of our company. It's also on the hat. I have a bigger one over here. I'm pretty sure I do, man. But anyway, guys, according to David Stewart, this was back in 1987, he wrote a thesis about that one specific glyph, and his best translation was, "And it came to pass." And it came to pass, guys. And that's because he says that the Mayan writing system has a deep Hebrew and Egyptian influence. He also used other languages like Chinese and Sumerian as well to kind of crack the code, but he says there's lots of Hebrew and Egyptian in the Mayan writing system. And it came to pass was the most accurate way to begin a story in those other languages. It looks like I don't, oh, here it is. Here it is, guys. And it came to pass glyph. Okay. Now another interesting thing also that was discovered since the 50s, and actually the Spanish were actually the first people to encounter that, but they didn't connect it well. They didn't know what to compare it with. They realized that many times the Mayan books, also for your knowledge, guys, 3 of the Mayan books survived the conquest, and one of those is in Dresden, Germany. And the one in Dresden, Germany was actually recuperated or recovered by the monument men. You know, when the United States sent people that were experts in art to recover artwork that was stolen by Hitler, right? Yeah, so these guys were able to recover an ancient manuscript that's called the Chilam Balam. And the Chilam Balam is the book that comes with all the prophecies like 2012 and all those kind of things, okay? But anyway, guys, these guys were able to discover back in the 1500s, the Spanish discovered in the 1500s that the Mayan books were written in an interesting pattern. A pattern that basically builds up the story in the form of a pyramid, they said. It says that when you're reading these books or reading these stories, it begins up building its way up to a climax. But then towards the end, or as it ends, it basically repeats the same contents that you read towards the beginning.
Chiasmus.
Exactly. So back in those days, they didn't connect the dots, but it was in the 1900s when finally these archaeologists and these guys from all over the world discovered that this was very similar to the Hebrew writings, because chiasmus was invented by the Hebrew Bible. Chiasmus was first used as poetry and later used also in the Bible and the Book of Mormon and many other Hebrew writings over time. But the Mayan textbooks that are still today, guys, you can actually buy them on Amazon these days. You can buy copies that have been translated to English. When you read them, you know, for us, it's not that odd because we understand, you know, like the scriptures were written in chiasmus. The Book of Mormon was written in chiasmus. When you read these books, you'll find lots and lots of chiasmus too.